Hey everybody, this is pramita here, and if you want to see more journaling videos and prep with me sort of stuff, please subscribe to my channel. Here I'm working on some of the design team elements that I'm planning on putting in my journal. It's the journal is already been spoken for, and I think I did a previous video where I did show how I am working on that. Now these are some of the elements, pockets, and journaling cards that I have made using Lindsey's two of the kits that I've used, Beauty of the Earth and Fragmenta Botanica. I think these cards have turned out pretty well. Some I have lined with book pages, some with coffee stained papers, some grit papers, and they can be used in a number of ways. I will talk about them once I start placing them in my journals. So usually what I do is I either add a little bit of trim just to make them a square tag sort of thing. So these are the basic things that I start doing once I plan a journal and make the embellishments ready to be used in the journal itself. So here you can see I've inked up the edges and I've layered them up and made a bunch of embellishments which will eventually go into the journal that I'm working on. So I'm going to show you how I am planning on using these stuff, and you can make a guess like how I have made these up. So these are some of the partially prepped ones that I have added a little bit of embellishments to, and some I need to work on. So I'm just going to go through them very quickly, and as you can see I already have a few scraps here and there which I'm planning on using, and eventually I'm going to stitch these up. Now I am pretty new to the sewing machine concept because I didn't have a sewing machine and then I did buy one. But I have fallen totally in love with the concept, and I would really love to add sewing to these. So right now I'm just inking up the edges, and this is just a scrap piece of paper, and I will be adding the journaling card or journaling small bits that I have, and make it a little bit more decorative. And then I might add them as pockets or use them as journaling cards or tags. That needs to be seen. Like, I may keep them pretty flexible initially, and then I decide what I would like to do with them. So now I'm just trying to place the this picture, printed element, whatever, and I think these elements are pretty good in size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to layer this up on this paper, and then maybe I'm going to put another layer to that. So this is a very similar concept to scrapbooking, like you photomat a picture and then you again layer it. It's similar to that. So basically I'm trying to see which part I can use. This is just a scrap piece of paper that I received in a Happy Mail, and my mail came wrapped in this basically, so that's how it is. So I am gluing this down. My lighting is acting a bit weird, but hopefully it will not get too dark so for you to see what I'm trying to do. So I'm just gluing this part up, and I will be trimming rest of the bit basically. And this is a map paper from Seven Gypsies. We rarely get papers from Seven Gypsies in India, where I live, and this was a very good quality paper, and I like the patterns very much. So this is how I'm trimming this down. This is a very odd shaped scrap, so it was a little bit troublesome, but anyway, I simply managed. And I'm just trimming this down, kind of photomatting, you can say, and I'm going to layer that on top of the paper that I have already inked up with small flowers. and I'm going to ink up the edges of this one also. This is Vintage Photo by Tim Holtz, and this is a very this is my usual go-to color, but I also use other darker shades like ground coffee and yeah, tea dye. Also I use tea dye, but tea dye is a bit lighter, so Vintage Photo is more to my style anyways. So here I can show you how I am going to add. I can add a little bit of trim, you know, this feathery kind of trim that I have. It's a scrap fabric, and I can snip a little bit of that. And I'm also digging into some other fabric stash that I have. This is a muslin kind of thing. It's very readily available in India, and it's very reasonably priced, and I am just trying to snip off a little bit so that I can layer something up. I like to add layers to my journaling cards, so I'm trying to take some threads out. I have seen my grandmother do a kind of embroidery which is known as a drawn thread. I don't know if anybody does that anymore, but she used to draw the threads out from her, from, you know, the handkerchiefs, you know, of my grandfather, and then she would do a stitch which would tie up the threads. It's very very difficult and very hard to do, and she had done tablecloths and doilies and stuff like that. I don't know where they have gone. Really, I have no idea, but I really my mother tells me that it's a very difficult process, because she too had done that, and she doesn't like that. She didn't like that very much, because it was, she, according to her, she would have to work very hard at this embroidery kind of thing. So it was known as drawn thread. I don't know if anybody does that. I need to look that up. So anyways, I already have this scrap piece of fabric which I am inking slightly, because I don't want that stark white kind of look, and I am going to layer that up. Yeah, I'm just going to layer that up beside the, you know, beside the, that element that I have just glued. Yeah, so I need but I'm not worried, because I'm just using a glue stick. I will eventually stitch these up, and in my next video you will see how I am, not only how I have stitched these up, but I'll also show you how I am using them in the journal itself. Now, I don't want this journal to be very complicated, because the person who's going to get it is using a journal for the first time, and I don't want to overwhelm her with too many interactive elements. Hopefully she would be able to you know, use it, put it to good use. Basically, she keeps a journal, everyday journal, and so she would document her days in this. I'm just trimming the extra bit that I have and making it look a little bit, you know, a little bit cohesive and not much jutting out. I wouldn't like that. Just a little bit would be okay. So now I'm digging into my stash and seeing what I can add to this. So this is actually a trim I received from Marianne. She has a shop on Etsy, Heart and Soul by M. Marianne is a very generous person, so whenever I order something from her, she always adds a lot of freebies, and this was a freebie. She had sent me a bunch of lace and trims for just before November, when I had ordered. So this goes in like that, and I'm just going to run my sewing machine over that. So this is another one that I had done with a similar concept, and I already had placed a bit of lace on the right hand side, and I've stapled it, but I might add something to it also. So this is actually what I plan to do is, I have this silvery kind of trim, which once again Marianne had sent me. So what I'm trying to do is I'm just going to snip a little bit from this, and I will use it in tandem with the lace, just to add a little bit of bling. I'm not much of a bling person, but anyways, this will be a little bit, not too much, because it has a very shiny, fibery kind of a string, and I think that would look okay with this, a little bit of shine, just a little bit to pop. So this is how I have completed this journaling card. I hope you can see how little tiny, shiny things are. And this is a scrap booklet that I made. I will will add a little bit of papers to it and make it a tiny booklet and tuck it in some of the pockets, in any one of the pockets that I plan to do. And I am going to add a little bit of just a tag sort of thing with the sari silk ribbon that I have, and I will try and add a little bit of color to it. So what I'm doing is I am digging into my distress ink stash, and I'm bringing out this pink, I don't know, this color is some sort of pink or deep pink, and I'm just using it in a very random fashion on the sari silk, because this is one of the ways in which you can dye your the natural looking fibers or whatever. And I'm just rubbing this with my hand just to blend this a little bit. Your hands automatically secrete some oils and sweat, and so you can do that if you want to. So I'm just trying to make it into a small tag and attach that, because I want a little bit of color. I don't want to make it too dull. And so this is this, and I'm going to stitch or staple it right now, and maybe later on I'm going to stitch that. So I'm just adding this tiny bit, and I try to staple that basically, and I'm thinking of stapling it, and maybe later on when I'll bring out my sewing machine and stitch all of the journaling cards, I can stitch that. So I've just stapled that just to hold it together a little bit. And this is, I think, from the Beauty of the Earth, and you get a ton of journaling cards, I tell you. It's a very good value for money, and I like how quaint and these journaling cards are. And this is I'm planning on adding a few trims to the tag. So I'm just snipping off this shiny white kind of string, that trim that Marianne had sent me. And these are some baker's twine I have in my stash. So since it is predominantly green, I'm choosing the green strings, baker's twine, and I'm just snipping off randomly. There's no measurement to this. I plan on using them in a bunch, and you'll see how I do that. So I'm just gathering up a few stuff that I plan to add to this tag. And this is a white twine I have. This is a very cheap material, but it's very good quality. And I am going to dye, or I'm just going to take off this stark white color, and I'm just rubbing the thread through the applicator, but it's not working too well. I generally don't do that. This is the process which I generally do, that I'm doing now. I press my applicator on the thread while I lay the thread on the distress ink pad, and I just pull the thread ever so slightly, just in a slow motion. So this will give an instant color to your thread. My hand is getting in the way basically, but if you want to see how I do that, I can do another tutorial of sorts. So now it's partially colored, and I don't want that to be colored wholly, because that's okay by me. So I'm going to gather a few trims, and I'm going to put those together and run them through the whole of that tag. So but the bunch is pretty big and I can't put them through this. So I do a trick that I often do. I just snip off a little bit of thread, and I make a loop through the the tiny piece that I've cut off, and I make it into a small tie sort of thing. I tie the bunch in the middle, and I just make it pretty secure so that it doesn't go off or just tear off, and I pass that through the tag punched hole in the tag, and as I pull that through the other end, you'll see how easily this will pass through and it just pops in. So this is how I generally pass thicker bunch of threads if I use in this manner. And now I have this big bunch which I am going to tie off eventually. Now the tiny thread that I had used, I'm going to use that. I don't need that green that much, so I'm trimming that off, and I am going to tie this with a small thread that I had used to pull the whole bunch through, and I'm just going to tie them off very securely, and maybe I'm going to put a dab of glue later on, but I don't think that's going to be necessary because it's pretty secure and my nails are filthy. I have been coffee dyeing and tea dyeing incessantly these days, and my hands are looking filthier day by day. Anyways, now my tag is done and I can work on something else. So let me dig into the rest of the stuff. So I have this this golden tulle kind of material from Prima, and I am using that to layer this tag up, the element. And what I'm going to do is I am going to ink up the edges first because I have not inked up. So maybe later on when I finish stitching everything up, I might add something as a a lace or something, just as a trim kind of thing for the tag. But right now I'm not doing anything. I'm just inking up the edges, and I need to finish as much as possible. That's what I'm planning on doing because I have a bunch of things to catch up to. Currently I'm very busy. As you know, I work full-time from home, and I'm just going to stitch all these sides up and maybe layer this bit of a doily. I'm not happy with that, so I am thinking of doing something else, but I'm not sure what. So I might wait till I decide what I plan on doing, because once I get things done, I cannot undo them basically. So I do have these coats from Lindsey's shop, and I like them, but it's very difficult to use the whole coat in one line. So what I generally do is sorry guys, I will snip off a coat and then I'm going to cut them into pieces. So that's what I'm doing right now. I am just snipping off a coat, and sorry guys, I'm having a tickle in the throat, and I'm just going to trim off this coat that says just a minute, at this coat which says don't blame, you must not blame me if I do sorry guys. So I'm just trimming off this coat by Thoryu, and I will ink up the edges and cut them into pieces and show you how I'm going to use this coat in pieces on the small journaling card, because that's what I like to do. I don't like to put the whole coat together because I find that's pretty boring. I can snip them off into bits and use them. So now I'm going to ink up the edges, and this part is left. I just need to snip that off, and I am going to ink up all the edges and then snip the whole coat into three parts, preferably three parts, or you can make them smaller if you have a smaller space, but that's how I like to do things. You can use bigger coats, it doesn't matter, but you can always snip them off into smaller bits and use them as you like. So I'm nearing towards the end of the video, whereby I just ink up the edges, and I will eventually snip this off and place them randomly on the tag. And I'm just taking off that stark white color by lightly rubbing the vintage photo, that distressing that I have. Now I can snip this off, and that's what I'm doing. So I'm snipping them off into three parts. So this is the first part done, and now I'm going to snip this into the rest into two more. So, and then I'm going to place it like this. Yeah, so I'm going to place it like this, and this I'm going to only place after I have stitched the whole element basically. So this is how I like to add quotes to my journals. Yeah, and this will not hinder the image in any way, and I can easily use a full lined quote. So if you like my videos, then please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I also have an Etsy store, so if you want, you can check it out and see the stuff, whether you like it or not. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'll also put a link to my Instagram account. And I also have a Facebook group which is predominantly on journaling and journaling supplies. So I will also put, add a link to that. So the quotes, I am a big fan of quotes. I love to add quotes, and I hope you add these quotes too, because these are pretty generic. These are botanical quotes on nature and stuff like that. So I hope you like this video, and